What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday. I heard you loud and clear, so we're going to be tackling this YouTube stuff today. I'll try to keep it as light as possible. I'll try to keep it as kind of general without getting lost in the woods as to what little keywords mean, but some stuff we do have to dissect a bit. But we're going to talk about it, all right? And there's pros and cons to it. It's not pitchfork time, I mean, in my opinion. But before we get into that, we got to get into some house cleaning. So the Star Saber review went up, and it looks like just the blue head and the gun were the exclusives. So check that off the list. She's a Butte Clark. Zeta's Unicron. I said small, nice toy store. That wasn't talking about them. In fact, the company that I heard that they put the most pressure on is a distributor overseas. King of a kingdom, you might say. Some people did hit me up and say, well, they could still put pressure on them to account for what they plan on producing. And that is true, but why go through all the kind of smoke and mirrors, cloak and dagger of having the extension on the time and all that? That's what doesn't make sense to me. Like, either fudge the numbers or don't. I wouldn't understand kind of the theatrics. That seems a bit much. I know it's still available on certain stores. I'm telling you right now, from the word that I got, it's just there. Don't count on seeing it anytime soon, if at all. I've even heard that Zeta might be trying to sell the mold, so I wouldn't put too much stock into it. That's what I hear, though. And who's to say if that's reliable in any way, shape, or form, but I'm just relaying that information onto you. In regards to the Force Friday from 2 weeks ago, a lot of people were saying, like, it's too much, questions needing answers for you. I disagree, because I think a lot of the things that I'm talking about in there can be, like, summed up in one sentence. Like, it doesn't need, like, a thorough explanation. It can be something just like, boom. It's like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And then there's some stuff that needs, like, a more meatier explanation that I hope they pay more attention to. But I think it's definitely plausible. I think it's definitely possible. And now let's get into our Unicron update. Shout out to Brian Brink, Breaking the Mold, End of the Realm, available on the Cool Table Podcast Network. Looks pretty stagnant to me. Not a lot of growth. So I would say you'll get a little bit towards the deadline, but unless they get another huge spike from these retailers, or they're just going to fudge the numbers, it's not looking good. But time will tell. It's a pretty significant jump that it has to make. But if it makes that jump overnight, and we are supposed to believe that that's all online retailers submitting their numbers, I don't know, man. That's going to be a hard one to buy. But whatever, I'm in for it, so I make out. But it's certainly shady business. And that should bring us to our discussion for today, which is the YouTube changes coming in 2020. But in order to account for this, we have to first go back in time a little bit. On April 30th, 2019, Facebook agreed to pay a record $5 billion to resolve a U.S. investigation into years of privacy violations, a settlement that increases the board of directors' responsibility for protecting users' data while changing little about the company's lucrative advertising business. This agreement was announced by the Federal Trade Commission, and this is where this story, in my opinion, kind of begins, with the FTC cracking down on Facebook and the data collecting and how that data was being used. Now, to continue that, let's first establish what the FTC is. The purpose of the FTC is to enforce the provisions of the Federal Trade Commission Act, which prohibits unfair or deceptive acts or practices in commerce. It also cracks down on monopolistic practices. So Facebook wasn't the only company that the FTC had it out for. It also had it out for YouTube. However, keep in mind that the Facebook lawsuit was for $5 billion. A billion. Crazy money. According to Variety, Google and YouTube will pay $170 million to settle allegations by the Federal Trade Commission and the New York Attorney General that YouTube illegally collected personal information from children. The fine is a record in a case related to alleged violations of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, also known as COPPA, according to the FTC. But it's just a drop in the bucket for Google, whose parent company Alphabet generated nearly $10 billion in net income in the second quarter. Not a year, a quarter. Under the terms of the settlement, YouTube, by the end of 2019, will implement a series of changes for how kids' content is treated on the platform to stop collecting data and serving targeted ads on such videos regardless of the age of the actual viewer. According to the FTC chairman Joe Simmons, YouTube touted its popularity with children to prospective corporate clients. YouTube touted its popularity with children to prospective corporate clients. Yet when it came to complying with COPPA, the company refused to acknowledge that portions of its platform were clearly directed to kids. There's no excuse for YouTube's violations of the law. Under the settlement, YouTube is required to develop and maintain a system that lets channel owners identify child-directed content so that YouTube can ensure it complies with COPPA. In addition, Google and YouTube must notify channel owners that their child-directed content may be subject to COPPA's obligations and provide annual training about complying with COPPA for employees who deal with YouTube channel owners. So that's what happened. They were sued because material is being targeted towards children children. It was going on to the regular YouTube, not the YouTube Kids thing. Due to those algorithms, data was being collected on those children. It was done through their parents' account, more than likely, because you're supposed to go through certain hoops in order to have like a YouTube Access account. Otherwise, you go to YouTube Kids. There's age requirements, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what happened. So then we get the blog from YouTube. And this is from Susan. Well, you can read her last name. Responsibility is our #1 priority at YouTube, and nothing is more important than protecting kids and their privacy. We've been significantly investigating in the policies, products, and practices to help us do this. From its earliest days, YouTube has been a site for people over 13. But when a boom in family content and the rise of shared devices, the likelihood of children watching without supervision has increased. We've been taking a hard look at areas where we can do more to address this. Informed by feedback from parents, experts, and regulators, including COPPA concerns raised by the U.S. Federal Trade Commission and the New York Attorney General that we are addressing with a settlement announced today. New data practices for children's content on YouTube. We are changing how we treat data for children's content. Starting in about 4 months, we will treat data from anyone watching children's content on YouTube as coming from a child, regardless of the age of the user. This means that we will limit data collection and use on videos made for kids only to what is needed to support the operation of the service. We will also stop serving personalized ads on this content entirely, and some features will no longer be available on this type of content, like comments and notifications. In order to identify content made for kids, creators will be required to tell us when their content falls in this category, and we'll also use machine learning to find videos that clearly target young audiences. For example, those that have an emphasis on kids, characters, themes, toys, or games. And that's where the question comes in for us, right? What does that exactly mean? Well, there's a podcast that I checked out, and I'm going to link it in the description. But there was some interesting information that came from that. It was on an episode of Tube Talk 177 with Sean McKnight, and they admit that the new direction YouTube is taking is still a little vague, so that they need real answers. But they spoke with Sean McKnight, who has spoken to the people at YouTube to understand what the changes are and how they will affect kids' content. Sean doesn't speak on behalf of YouTube, obviously. It's purely his interpretation of the conversation he had, but it's the closest thing we have to an inside source. Sean has various channels on YouTube, and they are very successful, etc., etc. But let's get into what he said. Sean says, before we can really identify what's going on and who should be angry and so forth, we have to think of YouTube for what it actually was, the intent of the platform. It's not an entertainment company. We as creators are the entertainment company. YouTube is a software platform that hosts the content, and it has always been an age 13 and over platform. So in order to create an account or a YouTube channel, you have to certify that you're over the age of 13. It was never intended to be a place where kids were going to consume content. Toy unboxing channels were kind of the first real foray into kids content on YouTube. And then there was the superhero genre. And then there was Frozen. This stuff kind of took off, and he estimates that about 33% of views were coming from younger kids under the age of 13. So YouTube attempts to create YouTube Kids as a standalone app. Wasn't a perfect solution, but it seemed easier for parents to just hand over their phone to a YouTube that they're currently logged in on using their profile. And kids were watching videos, and because of the suggestion algorithm that YouTube puts in place, kids were being deviated from Peppa the Pig to content that wasn't necessarily appropriate for children of that age. I think it's pretty clear to a lot of people that there were children using parents' accounts, and that's where the FTC had a problem, was knowing that children were consuming content on the platform, and then YouTube was using that viewer behavior to serve targeted ads. That's what the system does. It's not something someone's consciously doing, it's programmed to do that. So the sharing of data from kids under the age of 13 was just happening. COPPA laws are set in place to protect children from these advertisements. He also admits that it's more of a parent issue than a YouTube issue, but as creators, we have a responsibility to know what the playing field is. So the host asked if YouTube told him what the implications will be. Is there a new process and you have to self-select your content when you upload it in the future? And Sean answered, yeah, that will be happening in the next coming months, obviously before January 1st. Currently, there's a beta for channels that have a self-certify against vulgarity, violence, sexual content, and so forth, more for safety for children, but also to make sure YouTube understands what the video is about, so they know how to rate it. That was a self-certification, and there's a trust algorithm that goes against that, meaning I can certify that my content is safe for all audiences, then YouTube has its own algorithm that goes in and it knows what's in my video. It's using Google Vision. It can tell whether that matches how I certified and so forth. Over time, I can earn trust in that algorithm, which also helps me in my growth. All they're going to be doing is adding one more line in there that says, is this piece of content targeted to children under the age of 13? Whether or not we click that box determines alongside the verifications through the algorithm how much trust we're gaining. The FTC has actually made a statement that by YouTube implementing this self-certification, and if a creator goes out and intentionally creates content for younger kids and certifies that it is not for children under the age of 13, just simply to bypass the policy and make a higher CPM on YouTube's proper, that opens up the content creator for exposure to the FTC that they can call out full force on that content creator. YouTube has put enough in place now to protect those children that I, myself, as the media company, uses the software platform to target the 13-year-old when it wasn't meant to be. The FTC can now come against me directly. We're talking about penalties, fines, potential prison, etc. The podcast stated PewDiePie is playing Minecraft exclusively now, but nobody can say PewDiePie is a kids channel. How does that fit in? He answered, I actually asked that question specifically when I talked to YouTube yesterday. I asked where the line was really drawn. I mentioned slime, Minecraft, etc. And it's not as clear cut as I think even what Susan put out in her blog post stated. They have to look at that on a deeper level. For example, slime videos made by many adults and a lot of teenagers make slime, but it seems like the younger generations are the ones who really watch it. I think they're looking at, okay, what was the intent of the creator? Are they clearly targeting kids? Then what percentage of their overall audience clearly is under the age of 13? Then somehow there's this whole calculation there and they try to verify whether or not that is a channel or a piece of content that puts kids at risk. It wasn't as clear cut when it came to trying to draw a line in the sand. That's something I'm glad I don't have to do. YouTube has to do that. And that's the basic meat of it. So what I get from that is that there is hope. Now I know Chefatron put out a video recently talking about it, and he's got an agent. That's big. I'll tip my hat to you. I don't have an agent. I just got Joe. But he was told that they're gonna paint it with a pretty broad brush. So I don't know. The nuts and bolts of all of this is that parents were giving their phones to children. Children were watching YouTube stuff aimed at kids. The algorithm started to pick that up, suggesting new stuff, ipso facto collecting data on children. You can't target ads towards children willy-nilly. That's been the same since I was a kid. Transformers was a giant ad, right? 20-minute ad. However, you couldn't have Transformer ads for the toys within the show itself. There's always been rules. The FTC cracked down, YouTube settled, YouTube has put in a new kind of vague idea of what they're doing. We don't know to the letter what that means. And in my opinion, from reading this and looking into it a bit, it seems like they're cracking down more on toy stuff than they are on video game stuff. Why? I would guess money, but we'll circle back to that. The question is, are they going to look at the algorithms? The majority of my viewer base, algorithm-wise, is 25 to 40. However, what they are assuming is that this phone is being given, I own that account, I'm giving it to my kid, they're watching YouTube videos, and as a result, even though the algorithm is picking it up between 25 and 40, it might actually be between 5 and 10, which I think is fair. Within the next couple months, it looks like there's going to be something on our side, the creator side, to kind of suggest what our video is about. YouTube's algorithms will be double checking that against itself and building a trusting relationship with the creator. I would assume, and we know what they say about assume, that if your trust building relationship with that algorithm works out, that you will be okay. I don't know that to be true. But I think when they're talking about toys, they're mainly talking about like the squishies, the eggs, the slime, all the stuff that kids are really into and kids are really watching. But we don't know yet. I want to make that clear. This is me being optimistic. A lot of people are saying this is YouTube's fault. Down with YouTube, they're censoring. It's not. Not in my opinion. The content creator YouTube split is 55-45. Creator. So for YouTube to do this, they're losing 45% of all of it. So YouTube is taking a heavy financial loss from this with all of those content creators. They don't want that any more than we do. But we got to protect the kids, right? And unfortunately, there are many irresponsible parents, and to be fair, I've done it myself, where you put something on your phone and you give it to them to watch, and you come back and the next thing you know, they're watching something that you would prefer they didn't. I try to be pretty in tune with my kids. I will correct that behavior, obviously. Not all parents are the same. If there is a villain to the story, in my opinion, it is the parents. If they were more mindful of what their children were watching, we perhaps wouldn't be in this pickle. However, I also know what it's like to be pushing a grocery cart through a grocery store with a kid screaming, and all you can do is give them the phone in hopes that they will be quiet for 10 seconds so you can get a thing of Nutter Butters. I know those feels. The question is, are they going to look at the algorithm? Are they going to look at the trusted matches within the algorithm that we as creators will be doing starting in October, it looks like, and following that in any shape, way, or form? If they do, a lot of us will be okay. If they don't, a lot of us won't. So what does that mean for you guys? You'll have to rely on blogs and stuff like that. Be mindful of where those blogs are posted, obviously. But you guys definitely get the short end of the stick on that. As far as me, I'll be okay. YouTube brings in money for me every month, that's a fact, but I can do without that money. The money to work ratio on my end it doesn't match out. It's very poor wages, far less than minimum wage. So I'll just do something else with my time to generate that money in that regard. The people people that are going to be in real tough shape are these people that have almost completely, fully developed enterprises based on their YouTube content. People that have quit their jobs, hired editors, hired light guys, hired cameramen, etc., etc., etc. You're talking about now 10 to 15 people on a payroll that overnight lose their job. Those people have wives, husbands, kids, etc., etc. Now you're talking about 200, 300 people affected by a decision made overnight in regards to one channel. Now YouTube is going to donate money to certain channels. I think it's like $100 million over 3 years that are into this sort of genre to help them along their way to get them set up, and they'll kind of be almost YouTube programming. I don't think that's a lot of money. It certainly won't pick up on a channel as small as mine. I think you're talking about channels with millions of subscribers is what you're talking about there. Nothing that we probably watch. But at the end of the day, it's to protect the kids, and we got to do what's right for the kids. It's a multifaceted problem with blame to go around. There's not a clear villain in this story. It's irresponsible parents. It's irresponsible data collecting algorithms. It's irresponsible content creators. Blame goes all around. I've tried to make a point on my channel, while I know that my content is targeted towards adults, to make sure that it's kid friendly so that adults and their kids could watch it together. In the rare case that your kids are into what you're into, because I can tell you on my side, they're definitely not. So I've tried to make it safe while targeting an adult audience. I've tried to be responsible about it. So what does it mean for me if it goes down? If you're at all interested in that, everything will just move to Patreon. I'll set up new tiers in regards to reviews and what you want to see, and that'll be how it is. And if you want to watch it there, cool. And if not, dude, that's cool too. I'll see you at a con or something. We can dap it up. But it's going to be interesting, and I'm hoping that more information will unfold as it goes on. And if it does, I'll cover it. And I'll try to cover it in the kind of cleaning up the weak spot so we don't have to take a whole another show for it. But that's it in a nutshell. I think that the intentions are the best across the board. The problem, especially with our country, I feel like, and I can't speak for others because I don't live there, what we have a tendency to do here, both socially, professionally, politically, culturally, sociologically, within our culture, is have a pendulum swing to an extreme. It gets all the way over here, and we try to self-correct, and we swing it all the way over here, but rarely do we ever end up with the pendulum in the middle, which is probably where it should be. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Take care.